Hello, and welcome to Interfaith Connections. I am your host, Jackie Fuller. Today we have on our show Eron Henley, and he is the author of Constitutionally Religious: What the Constitutions of 180 Countries Say About Religion and Belief. And he compiled it into this marvelous book, and I'm very happy to have him come on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Sure. Now, when we begin, we usually like to ask people to share with us some background information about themselves. So feel free to share us like who you are and where you're from and what inspired you to get involved in religion.
I'm Jamaican, and I came to the United States roughly almost 14 years ago to fill a position as the communications director for a global nonprofit, the Baptist World Alliance, which is based in Northern Virginia. I am an ordained clergy within the Baptist tradition, but I'm also a trained journalist. My graduate degree is in journalism from the Venerable Temple University in Philadelphia. Oh. So I served as a congregational pastor in Jamaica, but I also worked as a freelancer in secular media there, as well as head of communications for the Jamaica Baptist Union, which is the Christian body that I belong to in Jamaica. And with the Baptist World Alliance, I was head of communications that covered all communications tasks within that body.
So when you studied in Philadelphia, what made you decide to say, okay, instead of staying in the U.S., I'll go back to Jamaica?
Yes, actually, I came on a full scholarship from the World Council of Churches, and it was expected that I would return home, and I wanted to return home.
Oh, okay.
So I came, did that graduate degree, and returned and filled the positions, continued the positions within the Jamaica Baptist Union, but also took on some additional roles. Mm-hmm. My interest in media goes way back, and in fact, I was a columnist with one of the newspapers back in Jamaica, and therefore when I, coming to do that degree was just a further development of my involvement in media that has gone for more than 20 years now.
Do you see it as a calling as well as your work as an ordained minister?
It is an outlet for the things that I love to do. I love to write. In fact, truthfully, I regard myself primarily as a writer. And media is one of the outlets that affords me the opportunity to write and to share my ideas and my views, my opinion and my perspectives. Also, it pushes me and urges me to do quite a bit of research. I also love to do research, and I love history as well. And therefore, media enables me to incorporate these different interests that I have.
So how did you make it work professionally? Because there are probably people who are like, I would like to do what you're doing, but
yeah.
How did you make it, there's other factors, maybe career, pay. How did you make it work for you?
Professionally, I have always I've never done, though I'm a trained journalist, but I've never worked full-time in a media organization.
Okay.
I've always focused on the nonprofit sector because, particularly within the Christian tradition and the more broadly based the various religious traditions, because I believe that persons of faith and the institutions of faith need professionals who can do this work. Persons who not only have an interest, but who have, and I thought that I should equip myself, if I am involved in media, I should so equip myself to be able to provide professional services to the different religious organizations I'm attached with, whether voluntarily or as a paid person.
Well, that's good to know, because usually in my conversations with people, particularly who come from like a communications or media marketing background, they feel that their communications work is undervalued.
Okay. There are some religious institutions and organizations, some individuals who lead these, who do not recognize the value of media. And there's some love to play it by ear. Some also do things, forgive the language, by the seat of their pants as well, without adequate preparation. There are certain aspects of media, such as in PR, we have what we call crisis communication, or crisis communication. And many organizations, especially those within the faith-based sector, do not recognize the need for a crisis communication until a crisis happens.
Right.
And of course, and part of crisis communication is preparation and to anticipate crises as well as to prevent crises from happening. But some persons are slow to recognize the need for these. Well, I'm hoping that as time goes on, persons will recognize that there is a need to have proper, adequate preparation in media and communication, including having professionals on board.
So how do you see it from a freelance perspective? Is that something that people can also freelance and do that type of work in?
Yes, there are freelance opportunities out there, and the opportunities, are not as great in some areas as in others, but freelance opportunities are there, especially with online media as it is now, with so many things being done through new media, through the internet, through the World Wide Web, through social media, and so on. The problem, part of the problem, however, is that almost anybody who does anything closely related to media see themselves as a media professional. And there's nothing wrong with them believing or understanding that they're practicing an aspect of media, but not everybody who writes a blog is a journalist.
Gotcha.
And there's some who regard themselves who are bloggers, who regard themselves as journalists. And you're a journalist to the extent that you present an unbiased position in your position. If you can present a biased position if you make it clear that this is my stance. But there are persons who present themselves as journalists when actually they're doing something else. They're doing PR work actually.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yes.
So that's always good to people need to really understand the difference between what a PR, public relations,
Yes.
we say PR, a public relations professional
Yes.
does, and what a journalist
And what a journalist does. Nothing is wrong with PR.
And nothing, no.
It's
no.
just that if it is PR, there should not be a pretense that one is doing journalism.
Right.
Yes.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
So which is interesting for you transitioning from that to being an author
Yes.
of the book. So what inspired you to get to say, hey, I want to find out what 180 countries are doing
Yes.
or have in their constitutions about religion, and what inspired you to put all this together to
Well,
have?
this book came about because I wished I had something like this. When I was head of communications for this global nonprofit, I wished I had something like this, already referenced, because we had presence in more than 130 countries.
Okay.
And among the things that the organization covers is human rights, which includes religious liberty. And there are times when we receive reports of violations of religious rights in different parts of the world, and we just didn't understand or clear what are the rights that are being violated. There are also occasions when we receive reports that rights are being violated, but upon further investigation, it was not a person's religious rights that were being violated, but the person actually broke the law under another statute. And having this as a ready reference, in my view, would help practitioners. I also am aware of persons of faith visiting other countries without adequate understanding of the faith traditions in those countries. I'm aware of instances where Christians from particular places go to other countries to proselytize, and completely unaware of what the situation is on the ground. Sometimes too, they create problems for the religious persons on the ground where they go to proselytize.
Right.
And I hope that this will help those who hope to go overseas to other countries to do any kind of work, whether missionary work or whatever, that they would have this as a ready reference as to what the various countries say about religion and belief. Most of the 195 countries in the world, independent nations, are covered here. Those that are not covered are those who either do not have a written constitution, such as the United Kingdom, or it was difficult to ascertain the information.
That's why I was wondering when you said 180, I'm like, well, who didn't make the cut?
Yes, those who didn't make the cut. It was difficult to ascertain, sometimes because of lack of translation of their original document. But as I said, countries like the United Kingdom do not have a written constitution.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay. So so when you say reference, do you see people in the State Department using this? Do you see journalists using this? Do you see students using?
Yes, I believe that this is a reference to anyone, for instance, who wants to have a handle on what's happening globally in terms of religion and belief. Persons who work within government, privately in the non-profit sector, and students also who have an interest in anything having to do with religion and belief. And if you notice, it says religion and belief because not all beliefs are religiously based or based in a specific faith tradition.
Right. Any countries in particular that stood out to you as you were writing or compiling this book?
Actually, yes, several. Let me start with the United States. I was very surprised that on comparing, there's no other constitution in the world that I've read that comes even close to what the United States Constitution is like. So the United States Constitution is very, very different from almost any other. The provisions on religion and faith is extremely vague. It is among the vaguest there is. I was very surprised about Mexico because Mexico has some of the most restrictive religious provisions there are. I was surprised at that. I was surprised as to how religiously inclined some countries are, such as Monaco, which is like one of the smallest countries in Europe. Countries such as Iran have very, very extensive provisions on religion and belief, very extensive. So much so that some omission had to be made.
Wow.
Because it is so copious, so detailed. I was a little bit surprised that the Vatican's own, because the Vatican is a religious state, and I was a little bit surprised about theirs as well. So yes, it is very interesting to read what these countries say about religion and belief. I was surprised as to there are some countries that mention almost nothing about religion and belief. Some countries in Western Europe, for instance, almost nothing on religion and belief. It's almost absent. But there are vague references that are included.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hold that thought, Eron? We'll be right back with Interfaith Connections.
Maybe I have with that?
Oh, thank you. Did you see anyone's broccoli?
You moved this?
Thanks for helping us.
No problem.
These strawberries? You're welcome.
We'd do anything for kids. Yet 1 in 6 children in the U.S. struggle with hunger. Help end childhood hunger near you. Learn how at feedingamerica.org.
Hello and welcome back to Interfaith Connections. I am your host, Jackie Fuller. Today we have in the studio Eron Henry, who is an author of the book Constitutionally Religious: What the Constitutions of 180 Countries Say About Religion and Belief. And we were just discussing the different countries and how they have their rules, if you will, like structured in their government documents. So I just want to continue from that. What other countries did you find really fascinating, or did you find countries that was like, wow, this is
Yes, Saudi Arabia too has a very extensive, they make it very clear, for instance, that other religions are not as tolerated as the what we'd call the established religion. The country that perhaps concerns me more than most, though, was Myanmar, Burma. because Myanmar, when you read the constitution, you get the sense that there is tolerance.
Right.
But upon further reading, you realize that it is not as tolerant as it at first appears. And therefore, it seems to give the impression that they allow various religious traditions within the country, but there are certain provisions within there that allow restrictions. But it's almost done, forgive the term, by subterfuge. It's not. It's almost as if it is deliberately hidden within the Constitution. And therefore it gives the air of tolerance, when actually it is not as tolerant as it appears. Myanmar, Burma, in Asia. Mm-hmm. That is a country that is, in my mind, of great concern. Brunei, based on the Constitution, does not allow other religious faith to be established. There are some countries in my time working with the Baptist World Alliance and writing reports about what's happening globally, where the Constitution may allow a level of tolerance, but leaders on the ground, especially traditional leaders such as elders, within their practices, they do not. There is not that level of tolerance, and I can think of institutions such as Azerbaijan, for instance, where the Constitution allows freedom of practice and belief, but the local leaders do engage in restrictive and sometimes repressive practices. And this has happened actually in one or two states, such as Chiapas in Mexico, I think, where the local leadership, takes a different position from what the national leadership says. And these are traditional leaders that, with that kind of traditional leadership that is in existence for centuries. So so a country may update its constitution, but practices on the ground do not change or are slow to change. So those are things that we come across.
Okay, because I'm thinking like the United States Constitution is what? It's definitely over 200 and so years.
Yes,
and then you have like other nations that are pretty much maybe within less than 10. Mm-hmm. And can you see, is there a difference of having more of a modern like constitution versus something that's over 2 centuries old?
Well, okay. Countries that have gained independence post World War II. We recall that United Nations was established after World War II, the late 40s. And of course, there are charters. There's various UN charters, such as the Charter on Human Rights. Most countries, and it includes provisions on religion and faith, such as charter. Most countries that gained their independence post World War II, at the formation of the United Nations that gained their independence in the 50s, 60s, 70s, take their cue from these articles within the United Nations charters and protocols. Not all of them do practice it. It is, one gets a sense upon reading some of these charters within the United Nations rather, that it's almost like a copy and paste.
Yeah.
But it is not translated to what is actually being done within the country itself. And there have been examples where it is very clear that there is religious tolerance, or there ought to be, within the Constitution, or some countries actually call it the basic law. But it doesn't translate into actions or government policy or practice. And they may not necessarily pass a law that violates the Constitution, but the practices on the ground do violate what the Constitution says, which they adopt from what the United Nations. Therefore, we commend the United Nations for what it has done, but more work needs to be done and to ensure that the practices comply with the provisions. That's not always the case.
Right. Now, in addition to this book, you've written another book. Can you share that with
my
us?
first book was a novel, believe it or not.
Okay.
That came out several years ago, Reverend Mother. Yes. And actually took up a copy for you, and then
Okay.
glad.
Well, you can use that to reference now. And
Yes,
I can
yes.
take at the end. So why Reverend Mother? What's the title? What inspired you to call it that?
This came out of. Actually, it is an imaginary scenario.
Fiction?
Yes,
Fiction
it is fiction, but it came out of the Jamaica Baptist Union that I was ordained with. Accepted women in the ordained ministry beginning in the late 80s. And a number of these women were unmarried. Some of them are unmarried, but express a desire for family. And because they have not settled into marriage, they have always, some of them, the desire for family is there, but they don't. Because the rules, of course, are that you don't, as a single person, deliberately go, especially as ordained clergy. But I imagine the scenario. What if one of these women decide to do something about it and have a child through artificial reproductive technology? And the book talks about having an ordained clergy woman who is unmarried, decides to have a child by artificial insemination. And it imagines a scenario as to how that would play out. It is based in Jamaica, and it created a bit of a stir when it came out because persons were appalled and horrified that such a thing could even be thought of. But then there were women who came out confessing, some of them not even clergy, but who have been in the church, said, you have touched something that I wanted, that I wanted the courage to express many years ago, wanting a child, not being married, or wanting a family but not being married. And these are women who do not necessarily want to adopt. They want to have, give birth naturally or to bear children. Yes. So it imagines a scenario, and that this book is a result of that. And it created a bit of a stir back then when it came out.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. Wow, really?
Yes.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because I said, how, did it just pop up one day and said, hey, I'm going to write this story this way,
Yeah, I wrote
really
it after
interesting,
one or two conversations I've had with my female colleagues.
Okay.
And therefore, I knew that these are genuine sentiments. And after the book came out, a clergy person who's related to me in New York, said that, he called me and said, I thought you were crazy. But then and he's of the Pentecostal tradition.
Oh, okay.
But then there was this clergy woman in New York who was not married, who decided to have a child.
Really?
Yes.
Did she decide based on your book?
No.
It
was unrelated to the book.
Oh, okay.
And that's why he says
that
your book was prescient, almost
so she
prophetic.
connected.
Yeah, he said, yes. So, but there are needs out there, yearnings out there, women of faith, who are not even ordained clergy, but the church or whatever religious tradition they're part of says, you should not expect to have a child unless you're married. In fact, the first line, I kind of gave the book away, the very first sentence, and because it says, this is the story of a woman who decides to have a child, although she has been told she should not want to have a child.
Wow.
And that is basically what the book is about. She's told you should not even want to have a child, but she decides that she's going to anyway.
Wow. You can't give away. You can't give away the book. I'm just curious to know why she's getting that feedback. Is it from people who are already mothers or parents? That'll be a curious read.
Yes.
That would be a curious read. That's really interesting to be inspired to write something. Well, not only you have something like as a resource, but a very interesting novel and dealing with kind of.
I actually wrote a screenplay based on it because persons have said to me, this should be made into a movie. And I wrote a screenplay, but I have not done anything with the
Oh,
screenplay.
okay. Okay. Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yes.
That would be interesting. I would, if that, yeah, I would definitely like to see that be out there more. It's one of those kind of conversations that, again, needs to be had. People want to kind of push things to the side, but I would say this is probably more common than what we would realize.
Yes. Yes.
So outside of writing, what do you like to do for fun?
What do I like to do for fun? Oh, Lord. I cook. Believe it or not.
You cook?
I absolutely enjoy cooking. I cook every week. I cook Sunday dinner. It's a tradition in our house, and I cook Sunday dinner. I absolutely love to cook.
What do you cook? What type of?
Jamaican meals, and my wife doesn't bake
Okay.
pastries and cakes. She leaves that up to me, and I enjoy baking Jamaican cakes and pastries like coconut bread or banana bread or carrot cake, which, you know, it's not just Jamaican, but we have a Jamaican flavor. We have a special Jamaican Christmas cake,
Oh, okay.
and that I love to bake. So I love to bake.
So hopefully one day when I told you my dad's from Jamaica.
Yes.
So somehow we got to make sure we get the sample.
Yes, I don't mind. I absolutely enjoy it. I'm a reader. I read more than 50 books per year. I believe it. That some people may say, "How can that be fun?" I love to read, and
That's a good thing.
I read a lot. And on my Facebook page, I do like a book a week.
Okay.
Book of the week. That's a regular feature on my Facebook. And I blog. I write a history blog. And these sound like work. You ask me what I enjoy doing. But, but I enjoy doing these things. I write a blog on Jamaican history, little known facts on Jamaican history. And
Is that the old time something? Yes.
Oldtimesomething.com. You know, you don't learn this kind of history in school.
Okay.
You have to dig into the history to learn them. Yeah, so I enjoy those things and
Okay.
more. I enjoy time with my family. Been married 30 years.
Good. Oh, good.
And we, as a family, go out sometimes together.
Nice.
You know,
Nice.
to the circus and so on. Enjoy those things.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much,
thank
Eron,
you.
for
Thank-
coming on the show. I am very honored to have you here and just learn more about you
And thank you for
outside
having
being
me.
a colleague with the Religion Communicators Council. I
Yes.
got to learn a lot about you. Thank you so much.
And thank you for having me. It's a
Oh,
pleasure.
you're most welcome. Thank you, our audience, for watching Interfaith Connections today. For more information, just head over to our website at www.interfaithconnections.com and feel free to connect with us there on social media. Thank you again for watching. Take care and bye-bye.